Hello. Is this on? Hopefully, there it is. Okay, hi, hello. Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I would like to just first ask, has anyone here already seen the show? Wow. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming. And to everyone who hasn't seen the show, you're in for a treat. It's very, very good. Welcome to, this is our behind the scenes conversation. We're going to talk about the place of Kander and Ebb in the American musical theater canon. If you're curious to learn more about the other community engagements events that we have going on at Olney, check out olneytheatre.org/engage. Thank you. There's a lot of really, really fun events happening, both connected to this show and our future programs as well. My name is Irene Martinko. My pronouns are she, her. I am the casting and producing fellow here at Olney. And I think a big reason why I was asked to do this panel is because I am a giant musical theater nerd. And I am very excited to be with two of the biggest musical theater nerds that I know. who know more about Kander and Ebb than I think any two people should. So I would love it if you guys introduced yourselves, say your relationship to the show and to Olney Theatre. And to each other. Please.
Hi, I'm Kevin McAllister. I am in the show. I portray the Trackman Man 2, and I'm also the director of this current iteration of World Goes Round.
Hi, I'm Chris Youstra, and I'm the music director and conductor for this production.
I will also share that Kevin is the director of curated programming at Olney, and Chris is the director of musical theater at Olney. I have asked both of them on numerous occasions, when do you sleep? And I haven't got answers. So very hard.
On a big bet of money.
Let's talk about Kander and Ebb. So we're talking about John Kander and Fred Ebb, the composer and lyricist duo who are arguably one of the most prolific writing teams in musical theater history, and who had such a great influence on Broadway. I think a lot of people in this audience know about Chicago and know about Cabaret, but I'd love to ask the two of you, what else would we know Kander and Ebb from?
So the big things that Kander and Ebb are known for are obviously Chicago Cabaret, also Kiss of the Spider Woman, which wasn't as a big hit of the other two, but did win the Tony Award and is a really, really dark but great piece of theater. I love that show. I got to see Cheetah do it when she was 72, 73. It was amazing. Also, the movie New York, they're known for. The movie's not the best movie, but it's a good movie. It's Martin Scorsese's, Robert De Niro, Bobby to me, and Liza Minnelli. And so a bunch of the songs that you heard tonight actually came from that. The other big thing that they're known for is there was a concert called Liza with the Z that was televised, and they wrote some music for that. Like, I forget, There Goes the Ball Game was that for Liza or for
Ring the Bells. There Go the Ball Game.
Oh, Ring the Bells, right? Ring the Bells, right. So they were known for that. They also had a bunch of like underground hits, flops, I should say. And the interesting thing is that unlike Sondheim, whose flops keep getting done, like Merrily We Roll Along is one of the briefest runs in Broadway history. They're filming the movie of it like any day now. They're going to film it over a 20-year period. And there's a new revival with Harry Potter, right, coming on to Broadway. But you don't hear of Kander and Ebb's other pieces, and there are a lot. They wrote, I think, about as many musicals as Sondheim did, but you don't hear about them anymore. The Act, 70 Girls 70, The Rink, which I actually got a chance to do, but is very obscure. And it was one of my first professional jobs here was doing The Rink with Kander, Ebb, and Terrence McAllister all in the room, and they were going to fix it. And spoiler alert, they didn't. The Rink has like some really intriguing stuff. But most of their shows that didn't cut through have kind of, been forgotten, which is why I do love World Goes Round, because if it weren't for World Goes Round, like songs like We Can Make It and Marry Me, which are phenomenal songs, would be lost. But they're active now with this show, because this show still gets done and done and done. So, yeah.
Anything to add to that, Kevin?
No. No, just kidding. I was going to say, I think on top of everything he said, the great thing about them and the things that we know is that they're also responsible for the elevation of so many great artists as well. Like Liza Minnelli probably would not exist without the work of Kander and Ebb. She won her first Tony because of Kander and Ebb and their first show, which was Floor of the Red Menace, and that was in 1965, I believe. And then we've got the rise of like Barbra Streisand has found some great hits through Kander and Ebb. A lot of I know you saw Funny Girl, everyone knows that musical, but there's also a movie version sequel of Funny Lady, which has a couple songs that are also in the show. And I think you find like the elevation of Cheetah Rivera through their storytelling as well. She's also became very prominent because of the work that they were doing with her. They were writing for her. They were writing for her to dance and to sing and to act. And a lot of that wasn't happening at the time. So I think the great thing about what they've offered us in the last, almost 60 years is that there's something for every type of singer. There's something for every type of dancer. And there's something for every type of artist who sings, because everyone's not singing first. A lot of it is story driven, which is something you don't find in some musicals. They write a clear beginning, a middle, and end. And a lot of their songs have, you got to stay with us because we're building up to a punchline kind of thing. We're building up to something that's really revelatory. So I think the great thing about the work they've offered is that we as actors get to act through song. Because sometimes it's more so just the flash of it. But everything they do has a point. You may not always get it, but there's always something that you might need to take apart to get to the core of what they're after.
Thank you. I mean, clearly, do you have more to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to add, because I think I can do better at it. No, I'm kidding. No, but I do. No, one of the things that has struck me as I've been thinking about their work through this is that I think a dirty sort of little secret is that, and I mentioned this at the Zoom session I did a couple weeks ago, is that I don't think that Fred Ebb is the greatest lyricist ever. I don't think that John Kander is the best composer. In fact, I don't even use the word composer for John Kander. He's a songwriter. For me, a composer is someone who takes a theme and evolves it and twists it around, and like Sondheim does, right? How he'll take this one little theme and then you'll hear it in different ways throughout the show. Kander and Ebb don't do that as much. So both of them, I think, individually are fine, but when you put them together, it's enormous. And that's what's amazing. The gestalt of the talent of the two of theirs supersedes them individually. And that's what's really exciting. And going back to what Kevin said about like the songs, their songs are, again, they're not just verse chorus. And like take like Subblock Tango. So listen to the lyrics. They're coming all along. If you had been there, if you had seen it, how could you say that I was wrong? Okay, not the greatest melody in the world, not the greatest lyrics in the world, but what an amazing number. What they do is they do conceptual songs. They'll take a song and wrap a concept around it rather than just simple story. They'll just wrap this whole thing. So for example, and that's why I feel like Chicago was such a successful movie, because they were able to celebrate that. So for example, Subblock Tango, very little lyric, not much of a melody, but an extraordinary number. And like, it's one of the few times I was in a movie theater, and when I saw that number, like I actually broke into applause, which is not like me. It was just like, I was so gobsmacked by it. But you look like they both reach for the gun, the concept number, the idea of him, Roxy being a ventriloquist-stomach, right? I mean, Chicago's full of them, but I can't do it alone. She's doing both parts of her duo sister act, that she needs a new person because she killed her sister. I'll spoil her. And then, for example, when Velma takes the stand, again, the only melody in the whole thing is when Velma takes the stand. That's it. But the concept of her going, this is what we're going to do on the trial, and it's amazing. And so I think that they have this unique pathway into American comedy / tragedy through celebrating Americana through these, and you can apply it to all the other shows. There, the movie numbers in Kiss of the Spider Woman, Cabaret. They had a whole conceit number about a telephone. I don't know if you were like the songs from Cabaret could be a whole nother show. We should do that. Could be a whole there was a song called the Telephone Song, and it was kind of like the predecessor to Hi, Bye, my Birthday. And it's people at the Kid Club just talking to each other on their phones. They're just hitting on each other because each table had a phone. Thankfully, that song's been cut. But even that is a concept number that kind of played with. And so that's kind of the unique edge that I feel like that they put on the music.
Awesome, thank you. You kind of read my mind. I was going to ask if you could talk a little bit more about why they complement each other and how this partnership forms.
I would say why they complement each other is because there's a simplicity to what they offer. I think the power of Kander and Ebb is that they are for anyone who doesn't love musical theater. They write palatable, simple, clean, effective A to Z work. Whereas you go to see something is like Oklahoma or Into the Woods, there's a lot to take in. Kander and Ebb find ways to, like Chris was saying, wrap concepts that are connective, that are pure in intent and clean. You know what you're getting from A to Z with them, and there's maybe a dash of surprise here and there. But what works for them is that, if you've seen the show, the simple number of ring them bells. If you're listening to the text, she's saying, I started off here, I went around the world, and I found the person I loved who literally lived next door. But anyone can relate to that story. Anyone can follow that. You don't have to understand theater to ride that wave. You're just involved in a simple story with simple people who are putting together palatable melodies. There's not any weird kind of harmonic things going on. We don't have 8-part harmony. We do in other parts of the show. But it's great because there are people who write for, and I use this with the highest esteem possible, just common man. And the thing I've always been drawn to about them is that in order for people to stay with you in doing these songs, you have to be human. You know what I mean? You can't. There aren't a lot of characters in their shows. They are very much the embodiment of human experience in a lot of what they write, and I think that's what people have connected with. That's why Chicago makes sense, because any one of us could be, sad to say, any one of us could be in a prison system. We know people. We understand that narrative. We understand, where we get to other shows and we get to the giant who's taking over the kingdom, and we have to apply a little more thought to that. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Into the Woods fan. I'm just saying that they write things that are easy to understand. They write songs that are easy to sing. They write songs that stay with you. And a lot of people can't do that, to just play 5 chords over and over and over again and find a way to make that a 5-minute number is rare and exceptional. And the thing I love about them is that I am always challenged with, you don't have to work so hard, Kevin. It's one of those things, you don't have to press on the gas too much with Kander and Ebb to be effective. If you stick to the roadmap they've given you, they've done pretty much most of the work.
It's interesting talking about the simplicity of the music. So those of you who saw the show, you hear Cheetah talking about vamp, right? So those of you who don't know, a vamp is usually a non-melodic figure in music that is used to cover something, often dialogue, often in action. So I'll be going, and then Kevin goes, but I love you, and sings the song or whatever. And that's how kind of bands work. And they're usually very simple. So for example, Farmer and the Cowman, bum, 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 bum. Well, we're gonna get you, Cowman. The farm, right? It's just a simple band. What's interesting, like when Kevin talks about how they take the simple melodic idea and expand it for the entire song. They do that with the vamp in a way that nobody else is able to do that. Because most people, vamps are very simple. They're very functional, for lack of. So, like for example, I'm gonna run to the piano real fast. So, because we talked about this at the Zoom thing, but like they twist on it in a couple different ways. So, for example, All That Jazz. Most people, if they're writing a vamp in that style, it would be for All That Jazz. They flip it, put the third, and you can instantly recognize it. Just that little bit of difference, and they're able to extend that difference. But then they also extend their vamps throughout the songs, like Kevin was saying. So one of the things that Kevin and I have talked about is there's the trio in Act 2. And what's interesting is they meld 3 songs together that have not much to do with each other, except they have the same harmonic pattern, because the harmonic language is good, but not necessarily intense. So the songs all do this pattern of a chord, raising the 5th of the chord, that's an augmented chord, to a 6th, to a minor 7th. They use it all the time. Sondheim, I think, only did it once. But what it allows them is to sustain interest without changing the chord for a while. So, for example, when Sondheim did it was, the sun comes up, I think about you. The coffee cup, I think about, right, from Losing My Mind. But they use it all the time. Sometimes I'm wrong, sometimes I'm right. But he'll never. That Funny Honey from Chicago. But they're also the songs We Can Make It. What are the first lyrics?
People may hurt us.
People may hurt us. We can take it. Here comes a backache. Maybe this time I'll get lucky. Maybe this time I'll say. And so on and so forth. I met a man, truly did. So they take that idea and they wrap the song around it. And it's not a vamp anymore, but it comes from that simplicity of pattern. They don't write these beautiful intros like Sondheim does. We're like, ba-da-da-da, taking that little melody. You never hear it. Their songs almost always start. But again, they take the vamp and make it different. So for example, in Cabaret, in Willkommen, they add the 6th. And also the pattern, change the pattern. Instead of going, there go, 2, changing the amount of it. And they have those vamps all throughout. Right? And the other thing they do cool is change it from major to minor, minor to major at a whim. So in the song Money that we do in the show, money, 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 they change it to major. It starts minor and then goes to major. They also do it, they put major, minor together in Cell Block Tango. They had it coming. That's a major note. The first note, that's an E flat and an E natural, which are different notes in the C major chord. C minor, da 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 da. So it's this whole idea, and I didn't mean to go into a lecture of like chord structure and everything like that, but it's just to show, kind of to illustrate even more the idea of that simplicity. They take this simple idea and they expand it. And sometimes one could call it repetitive, but at the same time, it is a very effective tool when used really well.
I said they were musical theater nerds, right? But I really appreciate that. And I think what you were talking about, Kevin, with the storytelling aspect and how a song can have the same verse over and over, but still build and still create the story. I've heard you both talk about the content of the songs and what they were writing about that other people weren't writing about. And could you talk about that and the importance of it?
Sure. When we originally started discussing doing this show, which I think was over a year ago, we didn't want to necessarily do what had been done. We loved the music, but we were like, if we're still trying to reach a new generation of theater goers, we've got to find themes and context that may speak to those who are very much Kander and Ebb fans and those who have no idea who Kander and Ebb are. John Kander just turned 96 last month, and he's still very much in rehearsal rooms right now. New York just opened up Broadway. Yeah, he was there. But the conversation was more so about why this show, why now, what can we do that's going to make it, interesting? So, of course, me being me, I was like, well, let's go as far as we possibly can. So I reached out to the writers, the creators, Susan Stroman, David Loud, Scott Ellis, and John Kander. And through the course of emails over almost a year, got permission to adjust some things. So the show is built on brief vignettes of things. And if you look at the overall arc of things, you kind of see that these 5 people have gone through an entire journey by the time you get to the end of it, of love lost and, love gained. And the idea of winning, the idea of losing affects all of us at some point in the show. But the undercurrent of that is that this is very much a 21st century idea in that we've changed pronouns. So there's a moment where I don't remember you, and then sometimes a day goes by, and the lyrics are sometimes a day goes by and I don't think of her. We change it so I don't think of him, so that it becomes duet between 2 male identifying individuals on stage. And that's a new lens to look at things through. We've looked at the idea of what colors, what cultures are on stage. The idea of casting was very specific in terms of like, if Nova's here, then I need Natasha to balance Nova, and I need Karen to balance Natasha and Nova. So it's very much thought out in terms of representing the community that comes to see theater now, and it's meant to be an extension to those who may not feel welcomed or seen at theater right now. And then we also looked at the idea of how do we reach people who know this work, but don't necessarily know how many people are connected to this work. So we spent over a year, and there were several interviews that didn't even make it into the production with various celebrities. Jason Lowith, our artistic director, actually went to London and interviewed Dame Judi Dench. All the interviews you see in the screen are actually real time just for this production. There's not internet clips, so all of them were sent specific questions and they sent in answers about their experience, about the power they've had, how their career has changed. And so I think what we're trying to do is reach a generation of people who are invested in and those who have yet to invest in, so that the show reflects the idea of gender, the idea of culture, the idea of language, the idea of identity, and it's wrapped in the idea of these men who wrote these amazing songs 60 years ago. When you think of Cabaret and the themes that are in Cabaret, the MC is one of the first gender-neutral characters. The kiss between Cliff and the guy in Cabaret is one of the first like male kiss that happened on stage. But those kind of things and their forward thinking gets swept under the rug. And so looking at the idea of Flora the Red Menace and women fighting for equal pay and equal rights and owning businesses and standing up for themselves and speaking out and saying, I don't need a man to be happy, was something that they were bringing to the table. And so we try to find a lot of that fused into the piece right now, and it helps happen for other powerhouses who are very much taking text apart and finding ways to honor what is, but also celebrate what can be. So we're leaving a lot of things open-ended, especially if you see the trio at the end of the show between myself, Nova, and Karen about what it means and who's upset and who's lost and who's gained and who's in love with who, because I think the idea of that is very much the world we live in now. So if it's more so about if you need it to be the idea of a man and a woman breaking up, then that's what it is. If you need it to be the idea of a man who was with another man who comes back to a woman, that's what it is. It's more so about the world you need to see, as opposed to us putting a hard label on the world we live in. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Chris, would you like to?
No. I stand by.
Well said, Kevin. Thank you. So you have talked a little bit today already about their influence on artists, Liza Minnelli, Chita Rivera, Barbra Streisand. Can you talk as well about their influence on other writers and the musicals that we have coming out now even?
So it's interesting. It's hard to always attribute who influences, like, what's the saying, ergo propter or whatever, which just because one comes after doesn't necessarily mean that something caused. But I don't believe Sweeney Todd happens without Kander and Ebb. I don't believe that happens. I don't believe the daring of going so dark. And they did it with Cabaret, and they did it with Chicago, and Cabaret and Chicago both enjoyed some success in their initial, but it's in the revivals where the shows got their most success. And the thought is that, America wasn't ready to have this critical eye and look at journalism, at the justice system, at the paparazzi around the criminal, which has just blossomed in the last 20 years since the revival. And so it took a dark turn, and when you get to Kiss of the Spider-Woman, I don't think there's anything darker that I've mostly seen until, there's some recent shows that have gotten pretty dark, but when they're killing people in Sweeney Todd, they're having a good old time with it. They're singing, they're telling puns, they're like joking about it and everything. It was funny. We had some people who wrote letters about South Pacific, there's a thought that South Pacific, even though based on true stories by James Michener, that the whole Younger Than Springtime subplot sentimentalizes prostitution, sentimentalizes being very young, because in the story, in real life, I think she was 14 or something like that. And they were really upset about that. And my point was, yeah, I totally get that, but earlier this year we threw a woman in an oven and you didn't say peep in it. We put Mrs. Lovett on stage in an oven, and it is all how you contextualize it. But I really feel, and music theater, everyone, I spent the first 20 years of my career fighting people's perception that music theater was this, with dancing cats and sparkles and all that stuff. And it's like, I would be like, look at Ragtime, look at Parade, and then, but you can also look at Showboat, and you can look at a lot of early shows that had interesting things to say about society, particularly American society. And even though Cabaret is not about American society per se, there were a lot of people when we did Cabaret here that kind of drew that thread, that it was possible to see in some of the things that are going on politically today. But the fact that they were so daring in taking these and looking at this really darkly, when maybe America wasn't ready, I think is, again, the main reason why Sondheim was able to take that football further. I don't know that Sondheim learned much from them musically, and I know that Sondheim didn't learn anything from them lyrically, because he had actually, he didn't disparage Fred Ebb, but he didn't hold Fred Ebb's lyrics up as these are the lyrics that I kind of live by. And so it's more of the tone that they set that's the most influential, and then you have to you have to roll Hal Prince into that, you have to roll Bob Fosse into that, into being able to take that journey. But it is true that America was not ready. And there's also, like, for example, West Side Story, one of the most powerful shows about problems in America, dealing with all sorts of issues, certainly racism being one of the biggest, but others as well, violence and everything. And that year, it couldn't win the Tony against Music Man, because people wanted to see Music Man, and Music Man's a great show, but it's not West Side Story. And so I think that's where their real influence came, that Sondheim was able to tackle the things he did, not just in Sweeney Todd, but in Assassins, the imperialism in
Japan, Rising Sun.
Yeah, right. So even it's like, it's funny, like even the fairy tales in Into the Woods get really, really dark in Act 2. If you watch Act 1 of you take your kid to see Into the Woods. Act 1, like, oh, I know these stories is on. Act 2, what? It's that sense, and I think it's that those creative minds, including Bob Fosse, just said, no, let's get into the dirt, let's get into that, and kind of explore what it is. And then musicals were still song and dance, but with something more important, even more important to say. And I think that's what their legacy is.
Would you like to add anything to that, Kevin?
Sure. I forgot the question.
Kander and Ebb's influence.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes, everything Chris was saying. I also think that the thing that I've always loved is that they've never been afraid to write about anything outside of themselves. That they will take a show like Scottsboro Boys, which had its share of controversy. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the show, but it is the construct of it is that these 9 black men are putting on a minstrel show to tell the true story of how these 9 black men were falsely persecuted for a rape they did not commit. But it's set through a lens of this is jokey, this is funny until it isn't. And when I saw the show, I didn't know how to feel. And it was interesting being in a Broadway house with an audience that wasn't sure if it was okay to laugh or if it was okay to clap or if it was, and the curtain call was awkward because yes, everyone had done their job, but you also felt so bad, 1, that you didn't know enough about this story before you came in, and 2, that they had done their job really well. And so the thing I've always loved about them is that's what I believe the power of theater really is at its core, is the ability to challenge, the ability to question. And I think shows like that have sparked, great writers like Jason Robert Brown has found certain truths that he's put in, that he works into his writing. And Lin-Manuel has found certain cultural identities that he's worked into his writing, because I think they've allowed people to express themselves in ways that maybe theater, like Chris was saying, wasn't ready for. But giving people the chutzpah to be like, it doesn't exist and I'm going to create it because I have something to say about it. Whether or not you're on board with it yet. And some of these things they wrote were huge flops, like Chris was saying. Like Cabaret was okay. Chicago was okay. But now Chicago's on task to be the longest running Broadway revival or show in history. Now the franchise is closed. But I think it literally comes from the idea that they operate without borders. They get excited by a story and they say, let's write this. Are we the people to tell this story? I don't know, but I'm excited about it. You're excited about it. Let's put it up and see what happens. And being truthful, that doesn't always work, especially through today's modern lens, that there are a lot of questions why an all-white team would put together a narrative about these black men, but there also is the opposite the offense of that, saying, well, no one else is doing it. So I don't think one is right because the other is wrong. I think both parties are allowed to question. And I think if that's what's happening, the theater has done its job.
Yeah, I think you can draw, and you can correct me, but I think you can draw also a straight line in concept numbers and musicals. So for example, like the commercial in Fun Home, you can draw a straight line from Kander and Ebb. I think you can draw a straight line from Kander and Ebb to the end of Strange Loop. The whole ending when it gets surreal and they're doing the Tyler Perry, I forget what it's called, but the Tyler Perry at the end. And so I think that their impact, as long as especially Chicago and Cabaret are done, their impact will go even further with composers being able to play with time and space and to lead the narrative. So like you see a Rodgers and Hammerstein show, and it's like, this is your narrative, this is your story, this is what's happening, and then you had, Sondheim who said, all right, we're going to go backwards and forwards and some, particularly Marilyn Woody did in other things as well. And now, like last 5 years. But Kander and Ebb also played with that sense of temporalness where you leave the show and hear Mein Lieber Herr, where you leave the show and you hear Mr. Cellophane, and that type of moment. I think that's also where they're going to be felt.
Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. Now, before I open this up to audience questions, I have one more question. You've talked about the relevance of these songs still and the relatability, and I'm drawn to why you personally are drawn to this concept and why you felt strongly about it. So I'd love to just ask, and this might be an impossible question, but do you have a favorite Kander and Ebb song and why?
Ooh. I wasn't prepared for this. If I were to give the easy answer, maybe this time is probably my easy go-to song. Reason I say that is because it is a personal mantra that I think we all have adopted at some point. I think at some point we've all failed and sucked and been terrible at and made the choice to get back up and try again. We've all at some point not gotten what we wanted and made the choice to either change tactics or go in the fight one more time. And I think that song allows you to believe that if you continually show up, that if you continually invest in choosing yourself, better things will happen. And I think, and it's also because Nova just sings the crap out of it also, so that also helps. But it's just, for me, I don't like to, and I say this, I don't like to think in every show. Right? I want to live in just, I don't have to have a lot of thought because the words are right there. The text is right there. I know exactly what I'm saying. I know exactly emotionally where I'm supposed to go because there's not a lot of jumping around like Chris was saying. But maybe this time she says maybe like 500 times. But it is something we all deal with, you know? Do I, as an artist, do I go to this audition? Do I speak up if something's uncomfortable? Do I ask to learn choreography one more time? Do I ask if I can come in late? Do I ask if I can take a show off? You know, there's a constant maybe that we as artists deal with all the time about, are people going to accept or reject? We have a huge press night here where it's like, maybe they don't like this one, maybe they're going to hate it, you know, but you go on stage, and I think that song has just kind of resonated in a lot of ways outside of the context of the show. But that would be the easy answer.
For the same reason, World Goes Round. Like for me, it's World Goes Round because they're very similar songs. The other one I do like, I love, because they don't write soaring melodies, but they wrote "We Can Make It," which is just a soaring melody. It's just wonderful. And the funny thing is, you know, Kevin was going to do the Baltimore leg, but originally we were going to try and get someone else to do it here, so he wasn't locked down for both legs. And we kept like hearing people, and I was just like, I want to hear Kevin do "We Can Make It." I want Kevin to do it. I think he'll sing it beautifully. He doesn't, but it was a good try.
Maybe this time.
No, and so I just love that song. Again, it's so funny. Like when you look at Sondheim shows, all of the marital relationships are dysfunctional. All of them. Or even the ones that aren't quite marital, but are like similar, like Love It and Sweeney. But I mean, he wrote a whole musical about that, about company, you know. And "We Can Make It" is just, to me, the beauty of the daily struggle of just trying to get through with this partner or whatever. And I love that song so much, and I think you sing it beautifully. And it's one of my favorite moments. Yeah. Yeah. And so that meant something. So like I was one who was like, I went to Jason, like, I think we should get Kevin to do it here.
It's not like.
Yeah.
It's true, but it was a process.
Lindsay.
Thank you. I would love to just open it up to the audience if anyone has questions for the fabulous Chris and Kevin. We have one right over here.
Thank you. You told us a little bit of the things that you did to make this your own production. Talk to the original creators of this review and been in touch with them. But what about the actual song selection? Did that change at all? Did you take some out, put some others in?
Yeah, so we lost 3 songs in this production, and we added 3 songs. One, because Fred Ebb died in 2004. But there were works that were created after And the World Goes Round was on Broadway in 1991. Those being Curtains, Scottsboro Boys, and The Visit, and there's one other. I can't remember what it was. Kiss the Spider Woman was in it, but it wasn't really in it, and it's one of Chris and mine's favorite shows that they've written. So we eliminated 2 duets because there was a lot of Chicago in the show. Class was a number that was in the show. I don't know if you know the musical; it's not in the movie, but it's just a duet.
Oh, it is. Oh, the credits.
Oh, it's over the credits. Okay, I'm sorry. I never saw it. So we got rid of Class because it was 2 women singing about. They're just horrible, gross women singing for 4 minutes trying to be funny, and I was like, yeah, don't know how long that's going to hold. Then the second one was called
Grass
Grass is Always Greener. And that one, we got rid of that one because it was a duet between two women who one of them was singing about how she just enjoyed so much being a housewife and not doing anything but taking care of her kids and staying home. And there's one line about baking meatloaf or something. And I said, I don't want to read any of the emails we get from people being like, how dare you say this is what women do in this day and age. So we removed those two pieces. We popped in She's a Woman, which is the song I sing after Natasha Does All That Jazz. Which is
Spider-Woman.
Yes, from Spider-Woman, which deals with a man's struggles with identity. We popped in What Kind of Man from Curtains, which is the review number where we all have the newspapers things. And then we changed the title of the newspapers so that they were more local. So Washington Post, Metro Weekly, Montgomery County Sentinel, Broadway World, some other stuff. So that's more tangible. And we added Go Back Home from Scottsboro Boys because there was nothing from that show. And as a Black man, I wanted to just make sure that that narrative was represented in the piece. So those were the three that we added. We lost three because What Kind of Man replaced a song called Pain, which was like a 5-minute number of people talking about how difficult it is to do dance numbers. And it just went on and on and on and on and on. And I was like, I'm dying. So, but the thought was that we are more clicked into social media and we're more clicked into people's perspectives of us now, which is why What Kind of Man in the review number came in and why you see the screen covered with reviews, because that's the world we live in. We read, we look at, we post, we take pictures of, we tell people where we are, we give thumbs up, we give thumbs down all the time. So again, speaking to the here and now, as opposed to letting Kander and Ebb be such a reflective piece. Yeah.
And then in the Act 2 dance, I wanted to play around with it because there are a couple songs. In the dance, you kind of need to know the titles of the songs to understand the narrative. So everyone knows, well, not everyone, but people know the song Married from Cabaret. So when we do Married, people remember that song, perhaps from our production, another production of the movie, whatever. But there was a song called Wallflower, which is from The Rink, and it was cut from The Rink. It's like, how in depth, how into baseball are we going if we're doing songs cut from The Rink? And no one knows Wallflower, and it doesn't make sense. So we took that one out. There's another one called See You in the Funny Papers. And again, people don't know that, and that didn't help our narrative of the story that they're telling. There was one other, I can't remember what it was. And then we put in, and then so I decided I really wanted the Roxy groove, because I just love that. I just think that's a great little groove. So I did an arrangement of Roxy, and we also did, that comes out of Cell Block Tango, which was originally it. And then the other was
Where You Are.
Oh yeah. And you know, for me the world goes around. The problem with it is a lot. If you've ever seen Side by Side by Sondheim, so it's a review of Sondheim stuff that stops before Into the Woods, stops before Sunday in the Park, basically ends with his late 70s, early 80s, and there's like all this stuff. And Kiss of the Spider-Woman is the one that I think got cheated because there's only, in the original version, they just do the title song, and that's it. And so I wanted to get in Where You Are. And I also did it kind of as an homage to Natasha because she played the Spider-Woman as signature a little while back. And so I thought, oh, it'd be fun for her to sink her teeth into that again. I thought that she'd have a good time with that. And just try, so we kind of reweave the narrative with those.
Great, thank you. Yes, right over here.
I love the show. I've seen it twice. I just think it's so terrific. I was curious about the final arrangement of the Cabaret title song, and was that probably the original production? Is that something, because it's extraordinary?
You know, I do like to get my.
Oh, yes, sorry. So the question is, there's at the end of the show, near the end of the show, there's an arrangement of Cabaret in which all 5 singers sing, and lots of harmonies, and it's very beautiful. The question was, is that an arrangement that was originally in this? Was this something that we put together?
So if I get asked that a lot, because I've done the show a couple times, and I would love to take credit for that arrangement because I have been known to go in and mess around with scores and kind of do like things, but no, I didn't do it. And in fact, there have been people say you messed with the score on that number. I'm like, no, that's what's written. It is the arrangement that David Loud did, who's a music director who I really admire, who doesn't do as much work anymore. He's dealing with some ailments. He has a great biography out, where he talks about the formation of the show and also his work on curtains and some other work with Kander and Ebb and others. But he did all of the arrangements, and so it's interesting because everyone calls the piece that was Stroman and what's his name? Yeah, Scott Ellis. Yeah, they did it, but it was David Loud who did a lot of the work that makes it unique. Because Nova singing maybe this time is great, but to pair Nova with two other great singers doing songs with a similar harmonic progression, that's really great. So I wish I had, but I did not.
Yeah. And I also think what's great about the show is that it bookends nicely. It's that the second song in the show is all five of us on stage singing individual lines, and then the second to last song in the show is all of us on stage singing together in harmony. But yeah, Chris was instrumental in us getting that, so thank you for bringing that up, because it is extremely difficult, okay? We spent many hours, I think we learned it in chunks.
Oh yeah, 12. We learned it in like 12-bar chunks.
Yeah. It was like, just gonna learn this, and we'll come back tomorrow, because we would take hours on just getting each part of it, right? So, yeah.
Wow. Other questions? Oh, right in front.
So you spoke about the wonderful partnership of Kander and Ebb, and you also spoke about reviews. And if I'm not mistaken, the recent reviews for the Kander and Lin-Manuel Miranda were not so great for New York, New York.
What was the question?
The question is to talk more about the recent reviews of New York, New York on Broadway, which were not so positive.
So the hard part of that is that we want to see everyone win always. When theater soars, it means all of us have jobs. It means all of us have things to go see. It means that we all have something delightful, educational, inspirational that we can do with our families. But we do realize that there are tripwires. And New York, New York, the movie is not the strongest film. So to pull songs from that and then kind of strip away some of the story that was already very thin is going to affect people. And you also run into certain chaotic situations when people are already attached to things. Like when you turn a book into a movie, or when you turn a movie into a video game, or a video game becomes a TV series, these are all things that happen on the regular. People are always going to be upset. And I think what's happened with our production is that we have, Work Was Round is in New York, New York. There Goes a Ball Game, which is the trio the girls sing, is also in New York, New York. Those are direct. Yeah, those are direct things from the movie. It's a solo version of the movie. If you've ever seen it, it's like in the credits, I believe. But ultimately, I think the difference between us and them is that our production is forward thinking and their production is celebratory of what was. And not to say either one is wrong or right, it's just on this side, we chose to look at things through more of a progressive lens, and they are celebrating more of the historical times and narrative that the story comes from. And we are very much aware, because the guy who wrote the reviews for both kind of pitted us against each other, saying if you want to go see Canon and Ebb show, go see this one, not that one. And that's not who we are in our core. We all know people who are attached to those productions, and we all want to see them do really well. And we know John personally at this point. So we really want to see him do well. He's 97. I mean, come on. So I think when you're doing theater, you're always going to fall back on what do people think. There's no way to get around that. The audience is pretty much the backbone of what we do and the only reason these buildings stand. So a reflective nature has to be applied to everything that goes on stage, because otherwise, why would I spend money for something that's terrible? I think ultimately there are shows that have gotten really terrible reviews that have done really well. So I think if the community stands up and says, hey, despite what this person has said, we're gonna go see that, that's great. Hopefully they'll come see us as well. Yeah.
There's a great story that John Kander tells, and he actually told it on, I think it was Colbert last week. There's a clip of him and Lin-Manuel on Colbert. And it was that when they were writing New York, New York, you're talking about critics and everything. So De Niro was pissed off because he felt like World Goes Round, which was Liza's song, and he had New York, New York, in the original version of New York, which I've never heard. But he was really upset because he thought World Goes Round was a much better song, and he made them rewrite it through Scorsese. And the joke that they tell is that the opening bum 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 is them just banging on the piano because they're really mad at him. But it made it a timeless classic. But I will also say, even with the improved version, World Goes Round still a better song. It just is. Liza one. Yeah.
Thank you. I have one more question, right over here.
I'm sorry. Could you talk a little bit about your character when you were singing I Don't Remember You to Nova?
Sure.
Because I got a sense of something that may or may not be correct.
Sure.
So the question was, can you talk more about the character from I Don't Remember You?
Yeah, in the show, Nova sings a song made famous by Barbra Streisand called My Coloring Book. The response to that, we made slight adjustments to that too, because she changes some of the pronouns to reflect that her partner left her for someone of the same sex. And then I come out and I'm saying, I don't remember you. Now, what I have gotten, and then I'll tell you what I'm thinking, what I have gotten is that some people think my character has amnesia, which I thought was like, okay, yeah, sure, that's what you're coming away with. But the idea of it is that you're with someone who is just not who you fell in love with anymore. You're with someone who doesn't laugh, who doesn't have fun, who doesn't acknowledge anything about love anymore. And you're forced to make a hard choice and just telling this person, I don't know what's going on with you, but whoever I joined into this partnership with is no longer here. And I'm having trouble holding on to the past and looking at this version of who you are right now. You are very broken, you are very sad, you're not laughing, you're not smiling, and I refuse to go back. And I refuse to pretend that we can go back, because there's no way for you to revert back to the person you were, or for me to go back to the person I was, because we're both different. And the idea has always been that we as people evolve, and we as people sometimes get into relationships, both familial and otherwise, and we stay in uncomfortable situations because we don't want to hurt anyone. So I think it's a very difficult conversation for those two to have. And then when Harris comes in and sings Sometimes a Day Goes By, I think it's he too is kind of arriving at some of the things that something's different, something's off. You left whoever this woman was, and we started something, and now something's not right. And this guy, my character, is still struggling with the idea of what it is to love and be loved, but he knows that it's not whatever this thing is between myself and Harris. And he knows that it is not whatever this thing is between myself and Natasha. And if you track it, you kind of see myself and Nova. And if you track it, you start to see that maybe he's struggling with just who he is as a person, which is why She's a Woman comes into the show. But the punchline of it is you have to listen to the whole song for him to arrive at the point that, and I wish that she were me. So, it's kind of those things where they're breadcrumbs. But again, I as director have deliberately not strung a very clear linear line, because I don't want people to feel like, oh, that all of a sudden it became this gay show And I didn't understand why, because I think there's so much more to life and there's so many more choices that we as people can make about love and how we love and how we see ourselves and how we let other people see us. And so that's kind of what all of that is in a huge, very large, deliciously baked pie. But it is very much left open-ended because, again, I don't want audiences to feel like we are hammering them over the head with the idea of love and relationships and our place in the 21st century world we live in. I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but yeah, it's very much rooted in the idea that as artists, we are constantly surrounded with the stereotypes that any male identity figure must be gay. Anyone on the stage must be a gay actor. They're probably gay. And it's like, no, that's not always the case. That's the easy way to look at us because we're so open and so pure, and so we have to be so free with what we do that otherwise you don't enjoy it. If I feel like I need to cry on stage, it's just as much therapy for me off stage as it is on stage. There's a purification of self that happens with all five of us, which is why we searched very long to find this cast, because we needed people who were willing to leave it all on the stage every night, regardless of audience interaction, regardless of audience size. By the way, tell your friends so we have more people in the audience because you guys are great. But yeah, it's really just, it's an evolution of self for each one of these characters. Karen goes through a long journey of the top of the show, talking about where are my colored lights. By the middle of the show, she finds someone ringing the bells. By the end of the show, she says, it's better that we tried it and it didn't go well. There are clear things for each character. You just have to kind of hold on to what was the last solo thing you've seen them do, because that's usually going to guide the narrative. Yeah.
Can we get a huge round of applause for Kevin and Chris? Thank you so much. Now, we're going to have to go because Kevin and Chris have another show tonight. What? Yes. So I just want to thank everyone who joined us today for this conversation. And thank you to those who are tuning in as well. It's great.
Oh, I didn't know people were tuning in.
We have people tuning in. Hello. So thank you so much. And exactly like Kevin said, tell your friends, tell your family, tell people to come see The World Goes Round. And thank you so much for supporting Olney Theatre Center. Again, if you want to learn more about the events that we do, olneytheatre.org/engage. There it is. But thank you so much. And oh, there's trivia night. It's very exciting. Thursday, Chris Youstra is hosting trivia night. It's Broadway trivia. It's going to be really fun. I will be there. I'm excited. And if anyone's going to come up with good Broadway trivia questions, it's Chris Youstra. So, and he'll have from what I understand, he'll have a keyboard. So
Maybe.
if you want to see more.
I can give you the answers too.
And one other thing, if you do love and would like to learn more about Kander and Ebb, first thing is there's so many great soundtracks that you don't know, right? Woman of the Year, Flora, 70 Girls 70, a bunch of those, The Ring. And the other thing is there's a great book called Colored Lights about them. That's just one of my favorite books. And then, of course, the David Lau book that I mentioned. I forget do you remember the name of that?
I'm reading it right now. I can't remember.
Yeah, right. But they're all like things to get into the inner machination because they are struggles. These songs are struggles as they try to wrap their head around it. Interesting to see that journey.
Also say the best thing about Chris hosting trivia is that you don't have to play against Chris at trivia because he will win.
Sure.
So thank you so much and enjoy. Have a great night.